Hello, thank you for joining me on this health and safety asynchronous video. We're going to cover emergency planning on this. Some slides I may go a little bit quicker because we had a guest speaker to talk about fire extinguisher training and the fire triangle. So those areas I may just refer to the live presentation. Just want to let you know that the group assignment's coming up soon. Um, Please check the Panopto video on the above on Blackboard. So we're going to talk about, for this learning objectives, things like what is an emergency? How do we prepare for it? What is an emergency plan? Could it look like? The necessity of having an emergency plan, an evacuation plan, a little bit of fire prevention and suppression, which again, I'll probably refer to the live guest speaker. Also, post-contact efforts for helping individuals deal with stressors and stresses from emergency situations and getting back to normal for everyday operations. Sorry, my voice is a little bit off. I'm a bit sick. So here are some examples of emergency plans, things like floods, natural disasters. We saw this in Iceland a couple times with volcanoes. Um, and looking at during the disaster, what is the risk for the individual, for the business? How do we evacuate safely? How do we get also back to normal after the emergency plan has been enacted and following the disaster? Let's go to the next slide. Here are some actual examples of emergencies: ice storms, SARS, COVID, more flooding, this one in Fort McMurray, forest fires, 2021, 2023, and so on. So what is your response? What is your first organizational response? Well, your local emergency organizations, things like emergency services, and responding to and following the emergency measures. Second, each province and territory. So first was municipal. Second is each province and territory has their own emergency measures organization from a larger scale for large scale emergencies. And then third, we have the largest federal, Canada, and its agencies can be involved in natural disasters such as, the forest fires that were all over Canada in 2023, if you're listening to this at a later date. Office of the Fire Marshal. You have the slides so you can access this as well. You can also reach out to your municipal fire office and also get consultation on legal aspects. The OFM guidelines are here as well for you to consult. This does not necessarily have to be implemented at your workplace. This may be a legislation that's a little bit higher standards, but you have this in your toolkit. Fire safety awards, here's just one example I got you in class, hopefully, to review this. This was part of your first assignment. It'll be also part of your second assignment. Look at what are the rules, regulations in order to obtain a fire safety award. It could be Canada, it could be local, provincial. These are things that you want to look for even in your own industry. Sorry, you're going to listen to me drink a lot of water here. Organizational response. Organizations must consider possibility of a disaster. What is the potential loss for the organization? Loss of life, loss of heavy equipment, loss of buildings. Safety programs need a planned response. You need to have a planned response to a threat, to this disaster. So there's two central aspects of emergency planning in organizations. One is how do you respond to the emergency? And then one is being a proactive emergency preparedness in case it does happen. Think of snowstorms, think of ice storms, flooding. Even downtown Toronto gets flooding. So your emergency preparedness. So first of all, what is an emergency in the first place? It is a sudden, generally unexpected occurrence or set of circumstances demanding immediate action. It's concerned with emergencies that either cause or threaten to cause the loss of life, loss or damage to property. Emergencies can be natural and occurring, like I mentioned, snow, flooding, forest fires. Can also be disease epidemics, which we have experienced. It could also be caused by humans. Uh, Accidents, fires, which, we got some training on fire extinguishers, chemical and oil spills, riots, terrorism, acts of violence. So, emergency preparedness, when we look at emergency planning, it involves the anticipation. It's that planning for the emergency itself, putting it to work, putting it into action as needed, and getting back to work as soon as possible where it's safe to do so. You may have to get released, let's say, from the fire department. They may say, okay, now it's safe for you to enter the premises. We've already inspected it, it's fine. You may have to refine your plans based on new incidents, new learning through part of your investigation. Emergency plan goals is to have no fatalities, to reduce injuries, to reduce any damage to any property, to restore business as status quo, having it go tickety-boo the next day. There are 5 stages to crisis management. The first one is signal detection. The second one is preparation. Third is damage containment. Fourth is recovery. And fifth is learning. So let's investigate this. The first stage of a crisis management process is signal detection. It's that prevention aspect, recognizing an emergency can happen. It is possible. It may happen down the road. It may happen 10 years down the road. Your second stage, so how do you detect it? How do you target it, right? Think of the um, fire alarms, smoke alarms that you have in your house, right? You know that there's a potential for fire or harm or carbon dioxide, sorry, carbon monoxide. So you're going to get those fire alarms, right, in your own home. Stage 2, preparations. Senior management adopts the crisis management mindset. There's a response plan. You got to create one. If you have one in place, you want to visit it and potentially revise it. You need to have some training for people, for staff, of how they respond to a crisis. This is part of your overall emergency preparedness. Stage 3, damage containment, damage control. You want to understand that it's going to take the most amount of resources to do. There's lots of information on everything from how to handle stress, employee assistance programs or employee family assistance programs, support for organizations, interventions as well. When we look at recovery, stage 4, it involves developing short-term but also long-term plans to get business back to status quo, back to normal, running tickety-boo. Stage 5 is the learning aspect, assessing the incident with a view to improve operations and procedures. This is like Lean Six Sigma. This is continuous improvement. How can you always make it better? How can you look at hierarchy of controls, of ways to not only mitigate the risk, but prevent it from happening altogether? When we look at fire brigade, team drills, other material, blackboard, um, looking at your WMIS, do you have a team in place to begin with? Where is the safe zone? How often do you do the drills? If it's in a large office building, let's say it's downtown Toronto, the big Royal Bank building, it's typically property management that does the drills and informs people who are in there. Head count, how many people are on site. Normally, when they go to the evacuation safe zone, do you do the head count? Who is the lead that speaks to the fire department? Um, and, the WMIS box, right? What's outside the WMIS box? Well, this is for the fire department. They have a master key for all these white boxes, and inside is going to have various types of fire information for the fire department. When we look at occupational health and safety today, I mean, this is a bit old. We're still living in COVID. Iceland has had several um, magma, volcanic eruptions. Some of it was ash, some of it was magma. Things like Norwalk. What do you do in terms of hand washing stations, strict cleaning procedures, decontamination? Fire, first aid, I've talked about this ad nauseum, so I don't need to go over this. But you have the link anyway. Emergency preparedness, pre-contact stage, and post-contact stage. So when we talk about pre-contact stage, assessing the hazards and planning potential responses to it. The contact, caring for the injured, how many people are first aid? Again, please have always somebody who's a first aider on site, all the shifts, all the locations, right? Think of how big the college is. Do we have enough first aiders even at the college? Ensuring that you have an emergency response plan. Post-contact is the emotional trauma. How do we also get people back to work? Employee assistance programs are essential here. Pre-contact, identify and address emergencies before they even occur. Have that plan, have that emergency plan, have a hazard evacuation, have a fire plan, have an evacuation plan, have authority, do you have the authorities' telephone numbers if it's a chemical leak, that ammonia leak? Do you have the right authorities on your cell phone, right? When do you contact Ministry of Labor? When don't you? Do you have the right supplies and drills? Again, we've had training on with fire extinguishers. So the basic requirements for evacuation plan. Let's look at this further. Your pre-contact, your hazard evaluation. Remember RAC, recognize, assess, and control. Do we have flammable materials, solvents? Is there electricity or ignition source nearby? Have your safety professionals evaluate it. If you are not an expert in benzene, then get somebody, right? If you're not an expert in fire, get somebody. There's lots of external resources available for us, lots of vendors out there. It's a small price to pay when it comes to saving people's lives. Emergency response plan has to be written, published, posted, but also trained, right? It's great that you may have a good alarm system in place, but you need to have also emergency communication devices, knowing who's in the plant, who are your first responders. This is essential, where they're located. Future proofing. Well, what is future proofing? It's an integrated approach to emergency preparedness. It's based on the notion that organizations have to anticipate and assess their potential risks. Remember when we talked about risk? It is the probability or chance of it even occurring times the impact or severity, right? So approach is based on graceful degradation and agile restoration, which are based on the following. Can you identify the event? You have to determine the event's consequences, right? That's part of your risk. That little math tool. What is considered minimal functionality of your company, of your business, of your operations? And then begin the timely restoration of it, of getting things back to status quo, the way it was before. Pre-contact, do you have an evacuation plan? Do you have an evacuation plan at your home where every worker knows where they need to go, how to evacuate, where are your evacuation exit doors, where's the safe zone, is it well marked, well lit? If all the power goes out, is there backup emergency lighting? And that's part of your inspection too, right? Is checking those things. Pre-contact, your evacuation plan itself. Site has to be divided into small related areas. The workers in each site have to be identified, they have to be trained, and they have to recognize one another, right? Outside the building has to be away from roadways. Make sure it's an assembly point that everybody knows about, not near a Starbucks or a Tim Hortons because you'll never find anybody. They've all gone there. And make sure you're not in the way of emergency vehicles like police, fire, ambulance. Once every employee has been accounted for, so you need to have a list um, of who normally comes in the day. And you sometimes have to wait to be instructed by the fire department, let's say, it's okay to come back in. When we take a look at pre-contact evacuation plans, any critical equipment or process that may increase the overall risk, is there, you know, equipment that is explosive? Is there equipment that's going to stop the proper evacuation of people? Like forklifts are in the way of a fire evacuation door. The end of the emergency can be called only by the senior person responsible. So you need to determine who's the lead. And it can be also the fire department telling you, okay, it's safe for now you to get back in, but you can't do it until you're informed. And you need a senior person inside the company to inform the staff to come back in, maybe even in phases if it's a large place. Post-evacuation assessment has to be done, what worked, what didn't, and where you need to improve on your evacuation plan, because you can always improve in that area. Emergency plan, when do you notify MOL, Ministry of Labor, police? If it's a chemical spill, who do you involve? Do you involve the Ministry of the Environment? Supplies, do you have emergency first aiders and equipment? What about your fire extinguishers? Where are they located? Are people trained? Do they know how to use it? Um, Making sure everything's easily accessible. Drills. So things like first aid kits can be even a small one that's on a person's desk. Drills, have those regular emergency drills. Again, if you're in a big office tower, the property manager who oversees the tower will do that. Rehearse it, document it, ways to improve it. When we look at contact control, um, you try to find ways to contain the worst from happening, harming workers, preventing injuries, accidents, illnesses, future illnesses, also damage, preventing damage to property. So are you trying to suppress? What type of barriers can you put in place? What about modifications? Can we substitute? Thinking about also our hierarchy of controls, but when we substitute, are we adding additional risks? What about isolation? So for contact, a fire plan has the same characteristics as the main emergency plan. What kind of emergency results do you have? Again, as instructed by our guest speaker, don't do the fire extinguisher if it's out of control. Call 911, get the fire department. You do not have to use that fire extinguisher. Your best bet is always to evacuate, call the authorities. Our instructor, our guest speaker came in and talked about the fire triangle of heat, fuel, oxygen. So I'll leave that for the slides, along with the chemical reaction. When there's contact for fire, you have an incipient stage, a smoldering stage, a free burning stage, an uncontrolled fire stage. The most important thing is when it's not controllable, the last, you call the authorities. You do not just, take your fire extinguisher, your ABC extinguisher, thinking that you can put it out. Contact considerations when developing a fire prevention design program, rather, look at the structural design, the construction of the building, the fire codes, the municipal, provincial, and federal fire codes. Look at also fire marshal building codes. This may all be out of scope because you've already entered the premises in the sense you've been working at the building, but you can always get help in this area. Along with barriers, what are your walls? Are there fire prevention type walls? Flooring, detection and suppression. Most buildings have a detection system. Are your fire extinguishers checked monthly and then at least once a year by a professional fire extinguisher, professional person who is usually your vendor that gives you these fire extinguishers, and if you're lucky enough, they'll check it monthly for you as well. How do you store your combustible materials as well and any igniting sources that are nearby? You may have to isolate. We talked about benzene, right? We isolate that. Contact, first aid, medical attention. What are the requirements based on that regulation 1101 earlier? Do you have enough first aid kits? Are they fully operational in the sense of, do you have all the stuff? Do you, maybe because of the size of your company, have a first aid room? Is there a hospital nearby? These are things you need to look at. Legislative first aid requirements based on your jurisdiction, number of employees in the workplace, the nature of the work, the danger of the work, distance to the nearest medical facility. Is it close to a hospital or not? Is it just a walking clinic? Or is it 100 kilometers away to the nearest hospital? Regulations specify number of trained first aiders, level of training that's required, and if there is any type of first aid training. Again, Regulation 1101 is going to be your best friend. Contact, this classification of fire, A, B, C, D, and K. Our guest speaker spoke about this. And the type of extinguisher in the far right. And basically, the group of classification of fire and extinguisher is based on the material. Is it paper, wood versus um, things like magnesium, titanium, metals, lithium for batteries, cooking oil, fat at McDonald's, right? You need a special class K extinguisher. When we talk about post-contact control, it's getting everybody back to work, basically, making sure people are healthy, making sure that cleanup operations are done. Steps can include immediate care of employees. You may have to lock down machinery. Investigation may have to take place. Keep unauthorized people out. See what needs to be disposed of, but properly. Notify Joint Health and Safety Committee. Complete accident reports. Review company procedures. Make sure they're up to date. At least once a year, you should be looking at all your policies and procedures. Communicate with workers about the event. Get them help. Get them counseling for trauma, PTSD, that psychosocial safety. Retrain people on health and safety, right? Even get an EAP counselor. When we talk about stress, focus on the victims, focus on understanding that this is a traumatic event. Just one incident can be PTSD for a person for the rest of their life. Make sure that they get the support that they need. I brought in EAP people, Employee Assistance Program. I've rented a boardroom, and people can go in confidence and speak with this counselor. Okay, let's see what our next slide is. As I said, main objective besides preventative and having a plan is that getting it back to work, right? Status quo, getting everything back to the new norm, so to speak. Understand that individuals can experience stress differently and reactions, and we don't know their previous experiences. Um, we're trying to get people back to work, but we're human beings, right? Some people may take longer, some may take, right away. They'll bounce back right away. Uh, People may live with this emergency for the rest of their lives, right? It may resurrect their own home was damaged. Um, Again, this can resurrect PTSD. These can be triggers. Employers should display tolerance, empathy. The leaders should be empathetic. And then you'll work eventually. It may take some time to get back to normal, but that is the main goal as well, besides the preventative, getting people to care and the planning, is to getting back to normal. I hope this was helpful for you. Feel free to reach out if not, and thank you.